for Eastbourne.
Stephen Carney, Director of SK Architects.
Thank you.
Anna Firth, Member of Parliament for Southend West. Delighted to have Stephen Kearney here from Southend as well.
Apsana Begum, Member of Parliament for Poplar and Limehouse in East London.
Good morning everyone, Jane Grattan, Head of People Policy at the British Chambers of Commerce.
Again, Matthew.
Hello, Matthew McCarrick. I'm here representing CAN, Construction Alliance North East, and I'm Managing Director of McCarrick Construction, a construction company in Durham.
That's great, thank you. Just before I pass over to my colleague Anna Firth to chair this first 20 minutes or so of this session, could I just ask you all, do you think the curriculum prepares pupils for the world of work? Because we know that the 2019 Employers Skills Survey suggests there are more vacancies that were proving hard to fill due to lack of qualifications or relevant skills and any experience at any point since 2011. And there are many other statistics about how there is a mismatch between what you want, businesses want, and what the education system is providing. Who would like to, we're not able to go to everyone to answer every question, but who would like to start off with that, please?
Okay. So I think the curriculum prepares, in my industry, software delivery, we do data and business intelligence services, and I think the curriculum prepares candidates for the sort of technical understanding, the high-level concepts, but a lot of what's involved in my industry is very experience-based. So it's very much about seeing problems as they occur and understanding how to solve those problems. So whilst it can prepare students and it can give them that background and that baseline, I think until they actually get into the world of work, it's very difficult to then gather that experience.
Anyone else, please?
So I guess there's a very different view in the profession of architecture about whether students are ready for the world of practice. My own view is that I think the 5 years that you do formal education gives you all the grounding, the resilience and the ability to understand the process of developing architecture, and then us as practitioners, it's up to us to carry on that through tutelage over the next 2 to 5 to 10 years. So I think actually students come out very robust, very able to deal with the challenges of designing buildings, working in the planning process, dealing with construction. But the thing that readily they don't come out with is that construction technology ability and probably that understanding of the planning system. So, but that's what we're about.
Anyone else? Would anyone else like to comment? Thank you.
As it's on the back of what everybody else has said, but I think the curriculum is very academic based and sort of sets pupils or young people up to go to university, and I think we should be focusing more on the practical side of things, and when the young people come out of university, they're still missing that experience.
What would you do to change the curriculum then?
I think it needs to have work experience within the curriculum as well, so that they've got those practical skills. So in the past I've had young people working for me. Some of the young people have gone through the academic based and come out of university 22 years old, and then I've had other young employees who worked and then part-time, whether it's an apprentice, worked through the system to degree level, and they are more rounded than going down the academic route, because when they come out of university they've got the theory but they haven't got the practical skills to go with it.
Thank you.
Yes, we're a network of 53 accredited chambers representing over 70,000 businesses, and when we recently polled them, 30% said young people weren't ready for the world of work when they left school. And when we talk to businesses, they say what's missing is the applied and contextualised learning, the ability to problem solve, the ability to work in a team, personal resilience in many respects. So whilst the academic route is fine, it's the more rounder skills and personal abilities in order to adapt to a changing workplace that the businesses really value.
Thank you. I'm going to bring in, I'm going to pass over to Anne. Before I do that, I'm going to bring in both Peter and Matthew. So, do you want to come in, Matthew, first, please?
Yes, I'd like to fully agree. Work experience is key. I would go as far as to say work experience should be compulsory for potentially 2 to 4 weeks for school leavers. Work experience could stop someone heading down a degree or further education route in something that they have no interest in at all. We take on a lot of people in work experience. Fortunately, some of them are then keen to come into construction and head down an apprentice route. Some of them don't, and it is as valuable to the employer and the potential employee to have that work experience if they want to do the role or not.
Thank you. And Peter.
Yeah, thank you. My view is that we have a bit of a one-size-fits-all education system, and I agree with what one of the other people said, that the curriculum is set up to go on to further education, and that's not appropriate for many people. My view is that everyone's good at something, and I think we need to identify at a younger age whether someone's academic or whether they show more practical skills, and we should encourage them down that route at an earlier time. Also, I think that there's a lack of practical skills, particularly communication skills. I mean, verbal, written. I mean, the people that I employ, they can't draft emails. They're scared to answer the phone. Some real basic stuff that I'd expect a bit more confidence on if they had a bit more support earlier on.
Thank you. I'm going to bring in Anna, just as we won't be able to get everyone to answer every question, so I'll maybe ask Anna to point out people who want to, but Anna, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. So the theme for the next 20 minutes is knowledge, skills and employability. Obviously, we've already covered some of that, but it doesn't matter if we repeat questions or if people repeat points, because we want the fullest exploration possible. So the first question is, how can we better ensure that young people leaving education are ready for work now, but also how can we better help them to adapt to future skills needs? Now, you've already raised the question of work experience, which is highly relevant to this question. So if we could consider that and perhaps consider the barriers to your company taking on pupils for work experience, I think that would be a fruitful line of inquiry. If people want to either put their hands up or indicate to me, otherwise I'll go round in a clockwise fashion, starting with Lisa over there. But if anyone's got a burning desire to jump in, feel free. If not, Lisa, would you like to start with that?
Yeah, I think one of the barriers is at schools, in that, as I sort of mentioned previously, schools very much, I'm not saying all schools, but it tends to be that the academic route where young adults are, the natural traditional route is A-levels and then go on to university. I think some of the degrees are a lot wider and they're not always applicable for employability later on down the line. But also from a barrier from industry, it's I see the benefits of taking on young adults for experience, but there's the time to be able to spend with that young adult as well to develop them, and you've got to plan and prepare and have a development plan so that you can spend the time to develop. I suppose when young adults leave school, they're the raw material and you've still got to spend that time to develop them. So
it's very helpful. Chris?
I think in terms of work experience and those barriers to entry, actually we haven't found it too bad. We understand there's going to be certain things that we have to do, safeguarding issues, responsibilities, etc. But it's been relatively easy working with some of the local schools to do that. I guess from our perspective, it's a case of time, because we've got skilled staff that are working on client projects, making sure there's people who can actually sit and teach that student, make sure that they get an understanding about what we're about and what we do, and then on to sort of that further learning and making sure that they are in a good position to start work. I think in technology in particular, it's an incredibly fast-moving industry. Things are changing very, very quickly. So, we can never teach all of that. Even if we wanted to, it's a very difficult subject to teach and make sure it's kept current. But it's then about just instilling that curiosity and making sure that the student does have curiosity to learn further about that given subject, making sure that they can do things in their spare time, and making sure they can take on some sort of hobby projects and develop their own tools and software in their spare time. That will help them to further develop their skills and keep current with what's available on the marketplace.
Yeah, hi. I think it's about growing young people's interests and turning their interests into a passion. And I truly believe that this is in the sort of the pre-16 rather than the post-16 place in schooling. So key stages 1 to 4 really. And I think if key stage 1 to 4 can grow the passion that the young people have, then they'll then find themselves a career path, and through that career path they will define a route through education as well. What we see as a business is people who bounce around different post-16 courses. They've kind of lost their way a bit when it comes to GCSEs. They don't have a firm direction with their life sometimes. So it's almost capturing at the younger age a direction for them, where their passions lie, what's going to inspire them, and where they're going to put their biggest effort. And going to achieve the best results and become the most employable person after really successfully completing, a post-16 course, whether that's an apprenticeship or an A-level or whichever direction they take. But for our industry in particular, aviation, it almost relies on passion. It relies on those people who have a deep passion and a real bug for aviation. And for us as an employer, we really see the growth, we really see the results and the high-performing staff that we have that have that passion. And that really has to start at a young age to give the individuals that direction with their life. So it may not just be aviation, it could be any industry, any sector, but it's almost maybe a situation where schools need to work close with industry, to enable the young people to see what the broad spectrum is out there, and to maybe offer experience days. So recently we've worked with the Youth Education Support, YES, and they organise aviation days at airfields for schools and for other groups such as Scouts and Cubs and Beavers. And it's a day to inspire the children, and it's a day for them to find out what it's like running an airfield or a career in aviation or flying an aeroplane. And it's that seed that starts at a young age that develops and grows and forms a clear pathway for their future. And obviously aviation is a very easy one to lay out on the table because of the nature, it's an exciting industry. But there are a lot of other industries as well, which are exciting to different people. Everyone's got a broad section of what they enjoy and where their interests lie.
Thank you. Steve.
I guess it's an interesting about that introduction to the subject at an early age, and I guess that one of the things that schools don't do particularly well is robust and clear information on careers advice. And I think bringing in practitioners into schools on days or particular events or particular interest groups would hugely benefit the teaching process. It would focus minds of people that are interested in those subjects about whether there is really an interest or whether it's just the outside appearance of what those vocations and and opportunities might be like. But I think the other thing is relation to work experience. We take averagely 2 to 3 sort of 15, 16-year-olds every year, and that is a timely and a costly process to have young people in the office for what is 1 to 3 weeks. And it was longer. It used to be 2 weeks. It's now come down to a week, which is not really enough of a flavour to get a feel for whether you really want to pursue that career path. But I think that there are things that we could do to incentivise businesses to encourage more activity in school and great work experience in the workplace. But workplace experience at an early age is critical to exactly like that initial or otherwise.
So just to follow up, what are those things that we could ask businesses to do then that would further encourage them to offer work experience?
Yeah, that's an interesting question there. Everyone will have a different view, really, and I guess it comes down to some recompense in terms of the time and cost that is incurred in taking that work experience through. Equally, it's taking pupils at the age that are really interested in the subject, as opposed to just want to have 2 weeks or a week out of school. And I think you get that from that early introduction through a careers day, and they used to be a thing. I've not been aware of them for quite some time. We tend to do a bit of it post 16 at sixth form, but not at that younger age when you really want to start to get a feel for whether that's your interest area, particularly around that time when you're selecting which options to take and which GCSEs and A-levels you may want to pursue.
Thank you. Matthew's got his hand up.
Yes, I'd like to agree with a couple of points, really. Lisa mentioned careers advice. I think careers advice is lacking in schools. A lot of schools seem to be incentivised to head down the A-levels route. They don't seem to be pushing local college courses. The backbone of our industry, construction, is apprenticeships. And we don't have enough people heading towards apprenticeships because they're not advised at a young age. So again, as Stephen had said, if we had a lot more work experience, if pupils were allowed to head into different industries to sample them, we would get people's interest at an earlier age. And by 16, people have already decided what they don't want to do. It needs to be more like from 10 upwards. There should be careers advice and potential to work in it might not be a full week's work experience, but work placements so people can experience industries.
Thank you. Jane, I've got a question a bit later that's specifically for you. Do you have a burning desire to jump in now, or could we hear from you in a minute?
Happy to contribute later. Well, I've just endorse what everyone said, the importance of schools and the business community working very closely together.
Because I'd like now to ask a specific follow-up. I'd really like to drill down into the detail of this, and I'd like to know how each of you are actively engaging with either your community or with schools, and what is good practice, but also what is good practice the other way, what community groups and schools are doing to engage with you, which is particularly fruitful in terms of allowing work experience or work days or any other sort of engagement to take place at an early stage. So shall I go back to you, Lisa, as you're nodding?
That's fine. Well, at Naylor Industries, we're based in Barnsley, and we have partnered with a school called Horizon. I think you introduced us, to Horizon, and they've got an incredible career education programme going, and they sort of reach out to a lot of businesses in the community and invite them into the school to do careers talks, to do career fairs. We're doing mock interviews with them, and they also have a STEM club, which is great for our industry. So we've partnered up with the head of science and doing talks and presentations in the STEM group. So we've got a real robust relationship with them, and it's working really well. And I think if more industries go into schools, it will open young adults' eyes to what the what different sectors do. So, for example, I was speaking to the career advisor at Horizon School yesterday, because healthcare was very much in the public over the pandemic, COVID, and young adults and children learnt a lot about it. There's a big rise, or she felt that there was a big rise in pupils interested in that sector now. So, the other industries where particularly are struggling at the moment, agriculture and logistics, if they sort of came into schools and explained more about what that sector does, they might get more engagement from young people.
Very interesting, thank you. If you've already made points and you don't want to add any more, don't feel you have to come back in, but over to you, Chris.
We're going to finish the session at 10:30.
Yeah.
So we're lucky enough in Ipswich actually to have the Creative Computing Club, obviously specifically centred around technology. It seems a bit silly to call it a club now actually, because it's more of an academy. There's a guy, Matthew Applegate, who runs it, who teaches about 350 kids a week at the moment. He's just about to scale that up to 600, so doing some inspirational work. And we work with him both in raising funds to allow children to make it through. And he takes some particularly troubled young teenagers off the streets and gets them to pass a A-level computing exam, which is incredible really. His average grade is between an A and an A star, so some incredible work. So we work with him to raise funds. We do some teaching, some the odd sort of modules here and there to teach them about what's happening in the industry, and we're just talking to him at the moment about taking on some placement students, both for work experience and for the eventual T-levels.
That's fantastic, Chris, thank you. We've only got about 5 more minutes. Caroline, did you want to?
Well, I noticed Peter has his hand up, so I'm keen to hear from him, but I did want to just very quickly, if I may, come in on work experience.
Peter.
Yeah, hi. So one of the things that I've done in the past that I thought was really useful for both parties was I've gone into schools and I've done presentations about my career and about how I got to where I got to. And I kind of feel that one of the things that students and children need are aspirations, and they need mentor figures and understand how people got from A to B. And from the back of that, I had quite a few people really enthusiastic that reached out to me. And I found that really helpful, because that's the kind of person that I'd look to take on, someone that was proactive and someone who showed a genuine interest in something that I was doing.
Fantastic. Did you want to ask a question, Caroline?
If I may, only that in a previous life I was Director of Studies and head of Year 11, which meant organising the work experience programme, which even sort of 15, 20 years ago was incredibly challenging. I recognise all the constraints you're speaking of in terms of the time and the sort of costs. One of the things that came up quite often was around insurance. And my question would be, in the context of small businesses particularly, can you see any kind of new initiative or innovation where small businesses can perhaps collaborate rather more to sort of shield some of those costs or burdens? Or how do we bridge the gap? Because I think in a previous session, everybody agrees that work experience is central, but I think it's only 10% of businesses who currently offer work experience. So that there's a huge disparity. How do we better bridge that?
Thank you, Caroline. That's an absolutely excellent question, but I'm only going to allow one person to answer it because I've got other questions I want to ask. So does anybody want to put their hand up and offer an answer to that? If not, I'll go to Jane. No? Looks like that one's for you, Jane.
So it can be difficult for very small firms to have the capacity to have somebody mentoring a young person. They may need a lot of support when they're in the workplace. Probably easier for the larger SMEs and larger firms to do. But I think one of the things the pandemic has shown us is we can be creative about this. So an employer can use technology to reach a lot of people a lot of young people through a lot of schools. They can record one session that can be shared with lots of young people. And lots of our employers through the Chambers of Commerce are using technology as well now to reach more people, and also setting real life projects for young people to do, so they're experiencing how their learning can actually be applied in a workplace setting without necessarily having to be in a workplace setting. Although obviously, the more they can get behind the scenes of businesses, the better, really.
That's really interesting. And if people have other reflections on that question and want to write in afterwards, please feel free. So the last question, Jane, is to you. Will local skills improvement plans provide the right level and type of involvement for employers in shaping local skills provision?
They're definitely a step in the right direction. So the evidence of our independent Workplace Training and Development Commission and our quarterly economic survey and workforce surveys have shown that there is a disconnect at the moment, that firms are disengaging from the skills system. And at the same time, there are record numbers of firms with recruitment difficulties and skill shortages. So we firmly believe that LSIPs can help. We were delighted that I'm very proud that Chambers of Commerce ran the 8 LSIP pilots across the country recently. They engaged at a very deep level in many respects, in many cases, over 10,000 businesses across that period, and really helped businesses to sort of think through their role in the skills system and are trying to get them to articulate what their needs are, not only now, but further ahead. And what we learned was that a lot of firms are not planning more than 6 or 12 months ahead. So it's really important that we support businesses to think further ahead, and industry trends and net zero and automation and digitisation, how that's going to affect them, and then bring them together with training providers and the education system to prepare young people.
Thank you, Jane. I've got about 30 seconds for Tom.
Very quickly, so I know LSIPs are mainly focused on trying to influence the FE curriculum. Do you think they could actually go further and look at LSIPs to influence the school curriculum as well, and some of the things going in schools?
Yeah, I very much think they do, because we're talking to businesses about, what skills and behaviours do we need for young people entering the workforce, and for post-16 and our existing adult workforce that need upskilling and reskilling. So I think, it's exciting. It's a really exciting time. We're at the beginning of having those conversations and shaping provision.
I think at the moment the focus isn't so much on schools, understandably to an extent, but I was just wondering whether you think there should be more of an explicit role for those plans and looking to influence what goes on in schools, secondary schools and primary potentially even.
I think we have a lot to do on the post-16 side, and it's going to take a long time for that to feed through. I mean, businesses are impatient. They've got involved in the conversation, and already they want to see what changes are happening there. But inevitably, as part of those conversations, they're talking about what they need from young people. So I think we will have that influence over time on the skills, on the schools and skills sectors together, really.
Thank you, Jane. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to pass over to Miriam, who's going to chair the next section on post-16 qualifications.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so the next section is about the post-16 landscape. And I suppose the biggest change in recent years is the government's emphasis on T-levels, which are their flagship programme. And of course, the idea is that it balances the academic knowledge side of education with some really valuable workplace experience. So my first question to you, it'd be helpful to know who has had direct experience of T-levels. To what extent do you think T-levels will meet that gap, particularly the gap that you've talked about in terms of formal work experience? Do you think they're a good idea? What are the kind of risks and challenges? So could anybody raise their hand who's had direct experience of engaging with T-levels? It might be nobody. No, okay, so I'm going to go to Jane first, but from the wider picture point of view.
So we're very supportive of T-levels. We've long called for a quality alternative to the A-level, something that's has rigour and quality and that's employer-backed. So we think they're definitely part of the solution to the skills shortages, and we're very much behind them. I think in terms of the industry placement, it's extremely important that young people can again apply that knowledge that they've learned through the academic side, the technical education side. They can actually apply it in a workplace setting. and that will give employers confidence when they're recruiting. You know, that young people have what's, you know, that they understand what the role and the job is on, the sector is all about. So I think T-levels are important. Awareness is still very low at the moment. I mean, they were launched and we had the pandemic, and they weren't all launched together.
Yeah.
So at the moment they're not available everywhere in the country. Yeah. So it is going to take time, but we think they're a very positive step.
Do you think there are any challenges, particularly I suppose for the FE sector who've got to organise the work experience, in delivering the sheer number of hours of work experience? I think it's 350 hours per T-level student. Do you think that's a challenge? Do you think it can be overcome?
I think it is a challenge. I think the flexibility that was introduced around sharing a work placement will definitely help. I think the employer incentive, the financial incentive certainly helps, as what my colleague said earlier, about helping to reduce some of the costs of having a member of staff. Because if you're in a T-level placement and you're just over 16, you need a lot of support and mentoring in a workplace setting. So as I say, I think employers will gain awareness and they will gain confidence, and with support, helping them through the sort of administration and the practicalities of offering a T-level and some financial support to help them bear the cost of that. I think we will see growth in industry placements.
Thank you. I just wonder if I could bring Chris in, because the IT, the computer science T-level, is one of the first initiatives. I mean, are you aware of it? Have you been approached to take on a student? What are your kind of thoughts around it?
I'm aware of it because of my own research. I haven't been approached about it. I think that falls into the digital category of T-levels. So I'm aware of it. I think the syllabus looks good, and I think there's some great benefit to doing that, both for the student and for the employer. So for the student, for somebody who's been very structured throughout their young life, coming into a business where they've maybe got a bit more autonomy, it's giving them that time in industry and giving them a bit of a taster of what to expect. And I've had work placement students stand at my desk saying, "Can I go to lunch now?" It's suddenly they're given a bit of autonomy and they're not being told exactly what to do when. But for the business, again, particularly in our industry, having somebody there who's asking why all the time, and somebody's having to teach them, for our more senior staff, it has a benefit on them because it gets them to question their own way of working. It gets them to question why we've done things that way, and is it the best way of doing things? Suddenly, they can take a different approach. So it's got
they're adding value to your organisation as well as deriving a lot of value from your.
But also, I mean, recruitment's incredibly expensive.
Yes.
So if you can approach people at a young age, if they look promising, you can keep in touch. You've given them a taster of what to expect from your company, and when they do eventually come into industry, hopefully they choose your business. So there's some great benefits there for businesses as well.
You're nodding. Do you want to come in, Andy?
I mean, I would just agree with all those points. Really, I think a large chunk of work experience placement within industry is an essential skill to have when you finish your education. That's why the apprenticeship system works so well. Because you get the blend and the balance of the academic and the skills, and also why I think you mentioned earlier about when the degree student finishes, that their employability isn't always great because they don't have that work experience skill. They don't know what a working environment looks like. So you bring that back to the T-level, and that blend of skills and the academic learning, I think is a great. A great thing really, and potentially the employability, maybe the student coming back to your company as well, which saves the employment costs. I think that's fantastic. It works both ways.
That's brilliant. So just to kind of widen it up a bit then, to what is the potential for the future of post-16 education? Can we think more creatively? What a lot of you seem to be saying is that it doesn't matter when someone starts work, whether they're 16, 18, 21, after graduation, 26 after a PhD. What they're often lacking is workplace skills. And obviously there are some jobs where you need a vocational qualification, a very academic one, medicine, law, architecture. But there are other jobs where you can learn the skills you need on the job with a properly structured training course. Do you think the school leaving age is too high? And should we reduce it to 16 and plough some of the money that's being spent on further and higher education into small businesses to give you the flexibility to provide that kind of training? Or do you value the kind of partnership with the more academic institutions? I'm going to go to Peter because he's got his hand up.
Yeah, thank you. So I think I'd make 2 points. I think the first point is that I don't think it matters what age it is that they get into employment. On a broad level, I think the fundamental thing that no one's really mentioned, and all these ideas sound great, is I'm a great believer in 80-20 principles, and the thing that will add the biggest value to these people are to have much better maths and English. And I employ people who are school leavers and don't go on to further education, and their maths and English are in some instances horrendous, and they're not going to have a decent chance in life if they haven't got the basic principles sorted on those two sort of elements. So I think I would just mention that, and then secondly, I hope this is answering the question. So my background is I'm a lawyer. I did a training contract, and one of the things that the training contract was brilliant because you did different seats in different areas to try and find out what area of law you wanted to specialise in. And I think that something similar could be applied to school leavers and that kind of thing. And also we did some real basic skills. We learned advocacy, we learned about accounts, we learned about all these different skills that you need to run a business, to work for a business. And we had mentors, we had people who we could go to for support, who we could look up to and we could aspire to be like. And I think that mixture, that kind of thing was such good grounding, but I couldn't do any of that unless I had the absolute basics, which are maths and English.
Thank you. I wonder if I could just bring you in, Lisa, because obviously when I visited Naylor Industry, just blown away by the range of different jobs that are available. Obviously, a lot of them are well skilled, highly paid, and if you can get students interested at 16 or 18, you can provide that training and also formal education at the same time. So what changes would you like to see to make that easier for businesses like yours?
Well, at the moment, we're a big advocate for the apprentice programme, and that seems to work for us. So, for example, at the moment, we're in the technical office. We are recruiting somebody at 16 years of age, but the plan is to develop them right up to degree level. I don't know if that answers your question as such, but because the apprentice scheme has the combination of working in the role, but also you've got the theory side of it as well. So that is working for us at the moment.
And is there anything that could be done to improve the apprenticeship offering?
I think when I did speak before I came today, I did speak to the apprenticeships just to get their side of things as well. And when they were making their choices, at school leaving age, they didn't know that they could do a degree at apprentice level.
Okay.
And none of their friends did as well. So going back to my original point about the traditional route is very much spoken at schools with A-levels and degrees, but not always are the different routes that you can take. And the apprentices that we've got didn't want to go down that traditional route, and they found out themselves about the apprentice. But it's a nice combination, and we have a lot of apprenticeships that are actually at degree level.
Yes, okay, brilliant. Yeah. Stephen, I wonder if we bring you in, because obviously it's slightly different with architecture. You really do need those formal qualifications. How could the post-16 route be improved for your potential?
Absolutely. I think the T-levels are a very good idea. I think that they are a pre-lead to architectural apprenticeships, which is a relatively new introduced theme from 2020. And it encourages much more inclusivity. To study architecture is a long and very expensive process, and I think therefore the architectural apprenticeship cuts down that exposure. You get real practical experience all the way through. The great shame at present is there are only 2 universities allowing level 6 in the UK. So that's at Portsmouth and South Bank. So it's very hard to get that initial establishment on the level 6 course. But I think the introduction of T-levels might help the universities develop more programmes. So, but very positive.
Thank you very much. And just final question. One of the organisations that came to give evidence to us suggested that a new baccalaureate system will be needed for learners between 15 and 18, so kind of GCSE to A-level equivalent, that would include academic, applied and technical pathways, so to allow young people to specialise at an earlier point and then really focus on the skills that they need. What are your views on that? And then I suppose any final comments in terms of reforms that you think need to be made?
Can I just add to what Miriam said? Because we tell now students they have to stay in school to 18 unless they're doing an apprenticeship, and they can do that from 16. We then have academic GCSEs at the age of 16, and then we allow them to narrow to the age of 18 in terms of A-levels, academic A-levels. And then we offer a binary choice. You can do T-levels vocational. Would not another option, as Miriam has just said, is one, you possibly don't have GCSEs, but you may have some exams just to test progression at the age of 16, but you would have a international baccalaureate, as is done in about 150 other countries, often with better skills levels than we have, the career baccalaureate as it's called, where you would combine technical, vocational and academic education, and then you would do that at 18 and not have this narrowing that happens with A-levels.
Can we bring Matthew in on that first, because I think he might have also had some comments on the last question.
It was more comments on the last question. I'm not familiar with baccalaureate, but apprenticeships work. We've been taking apprentices on. We were established in the 50s. We've been taking apprentices on for years and years. They work for us. In the apprentices going to trades, they go into managers, they go into directors of our company, our board of directors, ex-apprentices who've been with us for over 40 years. I don't know about baccalaureates. I can see the place for T-levels in certain industries, but for construction, apprenticeships work. We don't want to dumb down the skill set of people or expect too much of people's skill set. I've heard that you'd be able to head into a course at level 3 for a T-level. If you had academic qualifications, you could head into a course at level 3. I don't think anyone would want to join a carpenter starting at level 3 without any formal education at all. For us, for the career route of trades, apprenticeships work as they are. We just need to have more of them. We need to have them in more wide-ranging job roles.
Brilliant, thank you. Peter, do you want to come in and any comments on a potential different route?
Yeah, I think the point I wanted to make is I don't see any point in putting a 16-year-old through GCSEs if they're going to come out with 10 E's or whatever it is in new money. All it does is completely ruin their self-worth and their confidence and any aspirations that they have. You can identify how, if someone's academic well before this, and you should be putting them down the route. Apprenticeships are brilliant ideas. We've done apprenticeships; they're wonderful. They don't change them; they're great. I just think we need to look at the individual, and we need to build up their confidence, build up their skill sets for things that they're actually going to look to do in the future.
Brilliant, thank you. Anybody else got any other comments on the potential for baccalaureate? Jane, sorry, not enough sleep last night.
So we're very supportive of the University Technical College scenario where young people study a mix of academic and technical. Again, the learning is applied and contextualised, and the destination outcomes are impressive for those young people. They go on to apprenticeships or they go into jobs or whatever. So, employers do value academic and technical. I think we need to do more on the academic side to make young people who go that route more work ready. And on the technical side, we need more people going into a technical route. So whilst we haven't specifically surveyed our members on the baccalaureate as such, I think we do need to do more to get more young people into a technical option, where, as a colleague has just said, it's better for them, for their learning style and for their interests, to make sure we've got pathways at post-16 for people at all skill levels so that they can progress, because we need more people with higher level technical skills. So it's getting everybody on the journey and then progressing them through. So I guess whatever system we have that gets the best out of people for their learning style and their abilities and allows them to progress as far as they're going to and they're capable of doing.
Brilliant, thank you. Back to you.
Just before I pass over to you, Apsana, it was interesting at the beginning when Miriam started, she asked about T-levels, and I think only one of you wanted to comment on that. And your survey says that something like only 9% of businesses are going to offer industry placements, the British Chamber of Commerce survey, and only 12% of employers actually have any awareness of T-levels. What should be done to change that? So if that is the case, and that seems to be confirmed by your responses today, it's a major plank of the government's proposal for T-levels. How would you, what should the government be doing to, get more businesses not to know about T-levels, but also to offer work placements?
I think the outreach programme really needs to improve. I think training providers, universities, schools, etc. They run careers days, but quite often that's relying on employers to go and visit them. I think going to small businesses and saying, look, this is what we're running. This is the sort of thing you can do. This is what you need to do to be able to take a student on for a work placement or a T-level, etc. And this is the benefits we think it will have for your business. That would massively improve the uptake. Just spreading that awareness of what's possible, and some case studies from other businesses as well would be great.
Could it possibly be something that's bolted together with the apprenticeship service that we have currently? Because at the moment, the outreach for the apprenticeships is huge. The website, all the businesses know about. We all apply when we're looking to recruit apprentices. Could it be something that's offered at the same time potentially to the employers who are taking on apprentices, because that is the portal that we will go to, really. So it's a good central place.
That's a good idea.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so I will pass over to Apsana, who's going to chair the final session about apprenticeships.
Thank you, Chair. So as has been said, this next and final part of this session is about apprenticeships. It's something that we cover a lot in our committee, and is also a personal passion of the Chair. And I just guess to begin with, we've talked a little bit about what more could be done to promote apprenticeships, but I want to specifically get some views on whether you think schools themselves are doing enough to promote technical and vocational post-16 options to their students, and if not, what more do you think could be done? And I might come to actually Jane first, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you. So again, when we polled our members, we know that one of the barriers to apprenticeships is a lack of candidates. They have jobs and not enough candidates coming forward. So I think for me that indicates that young people are not potentially being given all the information, or not potentially understanding all the different career routes open to them. And I know walking past my local high school, there's a big banner outside saying X% of our students go on to university, and I'm thinking I like one that says and X% go on to
absolutely.
Really good quality apprenticeships.
One thing that came up, I think, in your survey, and I think that was in the pandemic, was again, sort of despite us being in a pandemic and maybe sort of having opportunities for exploration of other types of education, there seemed to be still a lot more promotion of the academic route. And I just wanted to understand a little bit more why you think that might be, and also, do you think we're just moving too slow in the country in terms of just changing perceptions about education? Do you think we're just not sort of there yet, and we're not moving fast enough in terms of really addressing and expanding our understanding of other types of education and promoting that at all levels in society?
I think you're right. I think the level of skill shortages at the moment is very, very serious. 3 in 4 firms who we surveyed recently were struggling to fill their job vacancies, and when we asked them what sort of jobs and what sort of skills. It's technical skills that they're looking for. So we know it is, you know, it's pervasive and it's acute, and we do need to do something about that. But, you know, it's how we get that sort of parity, how we get, you know, the schools and young people and parents to recognise the value of technical routes. You know, businesses need to work with schools, and as we said earlier, I think the LSIP process will help with that. But for many years, Chambers have been bringing businesses and schools together to help young people and school leaders understand, you know, the value that employers place on these vocational and technical routes. But, you know, to what extent are schools incentivised or measured on the technical routes and the apprenticeship routes that, you know, they bring forward? The Baker Clause has been very useful, and certainly a useful start in making sure that, you know, alternative providers can get in front of young people and parents, and, you know, make sure that they understand it. But we have a long way to go. But you know, the apprenticeship is very highly thought of by businesses now. It's good quality and it's a brilliant route for young people. Really, you know, accelerated route into really good careers. So
I think that point you made just there about parity is a really important one for us in the committee. I'll come to Matthew next. I can see your hand is up.
Thank you. I don't think apprenticeships are promoted sufficiently in schools. I think schools are incentivised to push people down the A-levels route. They're measured, they've got targets to follow. They are almost insularly keeping the students in schools, stay here, do an A-level route, as opposed to even considering the local college. For us, we deal directly, we're a small SME, we deal directly with local colleges, schools, but most of the local colleges within the North East. If we're doing that, presumably other construction companies and other companies are doing the same. There's a lot of resources involved in us dealing with these companies directly. If there was a central liaison where we could say, look, we need 4 bricklayers or we need 4 plumbers, or vice versa, if the college that said, we've got these people on our course, we need placements for them. If there was a central resource to work all of that through, it would speed up a lot of the process. We do a lot of, we carry out apprenticeships in various trades, and often an apprentice needs to carry out various different roles over the course of the apprenticeship. Some employers are concerned that they can't fulfill those roles and therefore they won't be able to give the education to the apprentice. I'm part of a collective within the North East called the Northern Counties Builders Federation, and within the bursary scheme they offer, we commit to, if we can't provide certain elements of an apprentice's education, that other members will do that. So we're doing that role collectively within the North East, but if there was a central liaison that carried out the interface between the education provider and the employer, it could be a lot more streamlined and it might encourage more employers to get into offering apprenticeships.
Thank you. Does somebody else want to come in? I'll take a question from Tom.
It's a point to all the panellists just about whether you have a local university or university local to you, and particularly for very sort of high-level skills and qualifications that could aid your business. How cooperative have you found that local university? Have you found them, what's your interaction with them been, and have you always found that they're focused in the right way?
We have a partnership, or we work with AMRC in Sheffield University, and they've been very cooperative. So we've sourced quite a few apprenticeships. We've worked with them, advertised the vacancies through them, and we've always had a very good take-up of the applicants. However, when we've gone to sort of colleges, they've not always been as helpful. Maybe they've not got the right course for what we're looking for, or it depends whether they've got the course or not.
So we're just putting in place the final parts for our next cohort of degree level apprentices, and we're keen that our apprentices stay local. I think, you know, with university, you know, as well as it being that first step into life without your parents, you know, it does wonders for your social life, and it means that you get to sort of interact with your cohort. So you know, we're keen that our apprentices stayed local. We have had level 3 and 4 apprentices in the past where they've gone to an on-site training provider for a sort of a 1 week intense course, and they do that every few months. But again, we were keen that they went to the local university. And I think one of the stumbling blocks we had was that they said that they would only accept apprentices for levy-paying companies. They said that that 5% that we needed to pay could only come through the levy. And we said, is it possible you could just invoice us for that amount? We know it's possible. We've had PhD students in the past from that uni, and they've invoiced us. But they said, no, we will only accept levy-paying apprentices. And obviously, as a small organisation, we're not paying into the levy. Our payroll isn't at £3 million. What we did find in the end was that the local council, who is actually one of our clients, would be part of the levy transfer programme, so we could actually transfer and make use of some of their unused levy, which was great. The stumbling block we've now got is that there's a large PLC in the Ipswich area who are, they provide quite a number of candidates onto that course, but they are now sort of dictating when that course gets run. So, Suffolk County Council are saying to us, we need to know the dates of when the tuition happens so that we can do this levy transfer, and currently we don't know because this large PLC is sort of dictating when the course will be run. So they're the stumbling blocks at the moment. It's a bit of an admin headache, but we're getting through it.
Just the 20% off the job training, because when I meet companies in Harlow, they often go on about that's a problem because it takes the apprentice away from the workplace. Do you agree with the 20%? Is it difficult? Would you chat? If not, how would you change it?
Yeah, so we've got a slight problem with our apprenticeship system with the new apprenticeship standard. The new apprenticeship standard has primarily been derived by large business, and it doesn't fit our small business model. We've had to adopt the apprenticeship because that's the only one that's available. I guess because we're aviation specific as well, that narrows it down too. But our apprentices are following a 4-year apprenticeship scheme. Now, for a small business like us, we are more responsive, more reactive to the training that we can give our apprentices, and we find that our apprentices become competent after year 3. The standard is a 4-year standard, which is excessive to keep our apprentices in a programme. Also, for our year 3 apprentices this year, they've spent 40% of their time at college, which for a small business like ours has been really inhibitive. It's been really problematic for us.
Is that the Harlow College?
Stansted Airport College.
Or Harlow College.
Yeah, that's it. And that's down to the syllabus again, which has been derived by large business that can afford...
What should happen instead? What should happen instead if you don't agree with the 20% or it's making...
I think the 20% is fine. I think that's fine and fair, but I think it's when it's been dictated by larger business, there's no flexibility in the apprenticeship scheme. So I think there needs to be more of a modular route that small business can interface into that scheme rather than this rigid structure and framework that's derived and put together by large business.
Thank you. Well, actually, we're just on the topic that I wanted to ask. I wanted to get a further sense of what barriers each of your organisations are facing in terms of offering apprenticeships. And specifically, I wanted to understand, I guess, there are some pieces of evidence and submission that we've had in the committee about the need to have apprenticeship programmes modernised, and sometimes also on the other end for the employer, the need to have standards regularly reviewed and updated, sometimes being a barrier. And I wanted to get a sense of how much that is an issue for your organisation in terms of offering apprenticeships. But also, I think in general, we think on the committee, and I think certainly the submissions have shown to us on our inquiry that awareness is generally quite high. It's the take-up and it's the completion rates. And I just wanted to get a sense, either in your organisation or from your perspective across different sectors, how much of an issue low completion rates are and what would help employers bring those rates up. Maybe if I come to Andy and then I'll come to Stephen.
Yeah, okay. So for our small business, completion rates have been fine. So the apprentices, being a small business, we're almost like a family. We support each other. We all work together closely. We've got good interpersonal links, and I think that creates a bond within the business, and that bonds the apprentices with us. So completion rates have been fine in our business. That's not been an issue. In terms of sort of reforming or maybe reviewing the apprenticeship structure and the scheme is pretty much what I've just mentioned. Really, is having more of maybe a modular type system, more of an adaptable system that small business can feed into, and maybe tweak modules or adjust the standard to fit the business. And I know that it might be quite a difficult aspect to look at when you consider there's the number of small businesses there are in the country. But there will be some companies that will fit straight into the apprenticeship standard framework that's there. But specialist companies like us will need more of a tailored, dedicated syllabus put together. And it's really being able to have that opportunity to mould and form the apprenticeship standard ourselves would be massively beneficial.
Thank you. And Stephen?
So, interesting enough, we get lots of requests for postgraduate work experience. We have, bearing in mind that, as I said earlier, architectural apprenticeships are relatively new. They've been 2 years in the making. We haven't yet had a single applicant that wants to have or wants to undertake an architectural apprenticeship. Before I came today, I looked on the RIBA website, architecture.com, and there is one architectural apprenticeship nationally advertised, a single one. And I guess some of the barriers are architectural courses are overly subscribed, have been since long before I studied architecture, and so therefore there's always a supply going into the profession. Interestingly enough, I guess there are other barriers to architectural apprenticeships and why people are not forthcoming, and I guess some of that is lack of knowledge. It's not widely publicised, and I think, as was mentioned earlier, it's not anything that I'm aware of that's been discussed in any schools or further education establishments, that is a process into the profession. So I think knowledge and awareness is the first thing, and then obviously encouraging the profession to take apprenticeships, which from our point of view is a really good thing. It's very hard to recruit, particularly given our proximity to London, where it's much more glamorous and attractive to practice. I think an architectural apprenticeship would be a really, really good thing for practices like ours.
Thank you. Lisa, just want to get some.
To be fair, we tend to have quite a good take-up with the apprenticeship scheme. We advertise through the university or the colleges when they have the courses there that we require. But I think from the school side of it, I think it needs to be probably promoted a little bit more. I think need to provide information to young adults, the parents, so that you understand what the apprentice scheme is, and so that they have options and different pathways to go. And I don't think, dependent on different schools, I don't think that's always the case. But from a take-up point of view, because we've advertised it in universities and colleges, we've not had too much of a struggle.
Thank you. I guess my next question just around we've heard that in other countries such as Norway, they have intermediaries supporting businesses to share apprentices, and I just thought, well, how could that work in England? And we've heard about things like group training associations that potentially could support small businesses in particular. Pool training resources together. Is that something that you think would be really good for us in England? You want to come in? Jane? Yep.
Yeah, I'm quite happy to. So Chambers of Commerce in the past have run apprenticeship training agencies. These have received external funding to support the administration around it, but they have had some really good results. And with the Flexi apprenticeship scheme that's just being trialled at the moment, one of our chambers in the Mid-Yorkshire is piloting one of those programmes again, and I think it works where you have sectors like sort of creative or construction in some cases, where smaller businesses maybe can't provide all of the experience that a young person needs to complete the apprentice, but as part of a collective much as you were saying earlier, part of a collective, you can share the apprentice, or the apprentice has experience of a number of employers and can get all the experience they need.
But also, I guess, in terms of sharing responsibility around mentoring and supervision, that sort of element, which is sort of really down to the employer, isn't it, to provide?
Yeah, certainly when they're in place, but again, the apprenticeship agency itself would have that continuing role in supporting the apprentice and the employer as well throughout the process. So I think that they can work, but they would need to be funded.
My next question is just about degree apprenticeships in particular. So how can we improve the take-up of apprenticeships among young people? And we know we're very aware of the trend of older apprenticeships at higher skills levels. So perhaps if I come to Lisa, if you can,
Yeah, I think it's just providing information to young adults that there is that route, whether it be through school. Well, I suppose it has to go through schools. Sorry, I'm sort of repeating what I've said previously, but I think the different pathways that young adults can take at 16 plus onwards, they just need to know that there is that route that they can go through the apprentice scheme at degree level.
No, I think the two Zoom you probably want.
Okay, yeah, just noticed that.
Just very briefly, I think it's also about breaking the stigma of apprenticeships, because as we've briefly spoken about earlier, the school prides themselves in the number of students that go through the A-level route and onto university, but it's also, I think, breaking the stigma that the apprenticeship route is the lesser of the educational routes, really, and it's almost bringing the apprenticeship up on more of a pedestal and making it more attractive to young adults, really, to take that option.
Thank you. And Matthew?
I think there's an element of age discrimination in apprenticeships. So we've had some fantastic older apprentices over the years. However, the employer has to burden a far larger cost of employing someone as an older apprentice. So there have got to be a lot of firms, a lot of companies who be put off by the additional cost and opt for employing someone younger. If there was a levelling up provided by the government, so all apprentice costs were the same regardless of the age of the individual, there wouldn't be that discrimination.
I suppose, I guess there's a question of, is there an incentive on employers to offer degree apprenticeships as well if there's sort of less scrutiny? Some of the evidence shows there's less scrutiny if they're offering degree apprenticeships, with older age groups. But also just generally, if there's, are degree apprenticeships less socially diverse than there's students that are doing, I guess, the same sort of subjects at university? And is that why, they're not opting for degree apprenticeships? I guess is a question. I don't know.
Can I go on diversity there? Within construction, our local colleges take on 2% female, 98% male. There's a hell of a lot of the population that we're missing out on in terms of employing women within construction.
That's a big problem. I've got a couple of more questions. So just on the apprenticeship levy, and I think some of this has been alluded to earlier, what reform, if any, do you think there should be to the apprenticeship levy? And again, I think there's been things that have been said, commitments made by the government in terms of reviewing, maybe not a formal review, but certainly the spring statement this year, there was talk about, trying to ensure more flexibility in terms of training and so forth. And just want to get your views on that. Anybody want to come forward first?
I think as a small business, the point I made earlier, really, just the restrictions around that levy, making sure that we can access all training providers, and it's not just the ones who pay into the levy, because that's a big restriction, and it's definitely had some bits to overcome for us putting our apprenticeship program in place. I think the rest of it works in general. Flexibility around being able to choose training providers, choose where that training happens and what sort of training happens. That's a big factor as well.
The current system with the levy leaves it too open to criticise the employer themselves, as opposed to sort of looking at what support there is from the government.
What do you mean, sorry?
Because I guess the burden is for them to sort of they get some of the money from the government to top up, but really it's down to the employer to deliver and meet the government standards. So does it leave it too open for employers themselves to be criticised?
I'm not really sure on that point, to be honest.
Yeah, I think sometimes employers are unfairly criticised for using their levy to upskill older adults in the workplace. You know, it's their levy money, and they want to use it to, you know, to upskill their current workforce and
not necessarily recruiting new.
Not necessarily recruiting new if there aren't the vacancies there. So, you know, what we need to do is ensure the system allows employers to upskill, to recruit and train, and to upskill people who are already in the workforce. And apprenticeships are a great way of doing it. Just to echo what was said earlier, the more modularisation we can get into the system, so that, you know, particularly an SME where a person may have a number of roles, you know, using the apprenticeship system more flexibly so that they can use the particular modules for the particular roles that they need and still have a valued qualification would be useful. Our evidence says employers are very much looking for quality modularisation of qualifications at the moment. But, you know, employers do value, as I said earlier, they really do value apprenticeships. And I think very often with the degree level apprentices, they might take somebody who's been working with them for a while and then put them through a degree level apprenticeship programme, you know, as they see the potential in someone and use it to develop them. So,
Yep. Thank you. Yes, Tom.
Thank you. It's just on this point about gender balance. I mean, I know, you know, the construction industry, 98% male, but my sense is that it's not actually just construction where there's a real gender imbalance in terms of participants. I mean, I know that the tech sector is quite male-dominated as well. I'm not sure about the other sectors. I just wanted to know whether you think there is a problem and there needs to be a piece of work done about, yes, promoting apprenticeships generally, but maybe making a particular effort when it comes to promoting apprenticeships with women and girls, because it seems to me that there's many imbalances, not just in the construction sector.
It's definitely a problem in the tech sector, although it is getting better. You know, I think that the balance has shifted in the last sort of couple of decades. So, yeah, I'd agree on your point. I think it's something that we need to improve the uptake.
So it needs to start way back in school, you know, at primary school really, and making sure that, you know, all students are aware of the different routes, the different types of careers, and you know, and young women in particular, you know, are made to feel excited.
What do you think it is about apprenticeships, though, that may have fed into this? Like, I mean, is it because apprenticeships are seen as like practical and there's something and technical and something about that? I don't know. It seems, you know, and I guess with tech and digital, I can maybe sort of get in, but I'm just sort of intrigued as to know what this disparity.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure really. It's traditionally it's been seen, you know, decades ago it was seen as a male industry, and I think, you know, in many ways some of the stigma that you spoke about earlier, you know, that sits with the parents as well, and parents have a big influence over where their kids progress. So I think, you know, in many ways some parents see an apprenticeship as, you know, potentially leading back to the old YTS schemes and things like that. So, you know, it's got that stigma attached. They will have a big influence on where their children end up.
Is there a way that sort of schools can be measured on the apprentice or the more technical route as well? Because at the moment they're just being measured on A-levels and people going to university. I think Jane brought up a comment earlier about one school had got a big banner out saying so many people going to university. So could we bring measures into schools that they're gauged on the technical route as well, or the apprentice route?
Unless any other member has any question, I've got one final one, and in a nutshell, how can we best incentivise businesses to develop and offer the volume and type of high quality apprenticeships we need? So, yeah, 1 or 2 points from maybe everyone, if we go. Andy?
Incentivise business to deliver high quality apprenticeships. I think it would be working with the schools, closely with schools, really, bringing the schools in with the business in order to feed in the right students into the apprenticeship programme. I think a high quality apprenticeship programme will only provide great results with great candidates that are coming through the system. So I think, you know, we're sort of probably going back to old ground again. It's all about, you know, starting early with the young people, giving them inspiration, you know, sort of moulding their passions and their interests, and you will get a section of those people who will naturally want to move towards the skilled trades, but they may not know that at that point. So by allowing that to develop and grow early on in schools, I think they'll come through the system, and then the employer will then have a better pool. And then that will be bigger incentive for the employer to take on apprenticeships and to grow their programmes, I would say.
Lisa?
I suppose it's the same as Andy, really. I think there's some inconsistency in schools with career education, and we are an engineering company, and we have the same lack of ladies in engineering, so it's engaging with schools and having extracurricular activities and focusing on different industries so that it provides information to the pupils at the time.
Thank you. Anyone else want to come in? Chris?
I think showing businesses the outcomes, you know, the point I touched on earlier about how it can affect the thinking of more senior, more experienced staff, but also, you know, having young people involved in a business can fundamentally change the culture of that business. You know, having that enthusiasm and that passion and that curiosity can really affect how a business operates. That, and make it as easy as possible.
Peter and Matthew, I don't know if you wanted to come in here.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. To incentivise businesses, I think it also ties in with what we've found as a supply shortage within labour. Well, we've spoken with local colleges, and they've said that they're lacking lecturers because lecturers are being pulled back into the industry because wages are going up, so they're more incentivised to go back into practice. If businesses were incentivized to offer their skilled, their older workforce to work with local colleges, maybe part-time, they're part-time employed, part-time working for the college, there's a lot of knowledge that could be transferred there down to the younger apprentices. And that would then hopefully encourage more apprentices and actually stop the skills shortage.
Thank you. That's a good point. Yeah, interesting point. Jane? Angela.
I've got a question, just rounding up in terms of everything that we've been talking about this morning. We're talking about the world of work, and we're talking about our post-16 qualifications and particularly skills. In your view, from running your own businesses, is the future of that world of work for our young people in person, working from home, or a hybrid? Good. Topical at the moment.
I'll go first on that if you don't mind, because I got some struggles with that in terms of bringing people back into the office. So the nature of what we do is very collaborative. It's a very hands-on thing. It's, you know, we have lots of design studio in the office. We have lots of visits around our buildings that are being constructed at various stages, not just for the graduate architects, but for, you know, the more experienced architects as well. And I don't think you can do that at home. I think you've got to actually be in the office place to do that. Whilst I think some hybrid may well be the outcome as we begin to settle back into a more stabilised work pattern. For me personally, in our profession, I think that it's something that is still very much studio and office based for sure.
I think it's very industry specific. And for my industry, it's going to be hybrid, and we're changing our working space to adapt to that, because people will now come to the office more to collaborate, to work together. So rather than having rows and rows of desks, you'll have more of a collaboration space, whiteboards, video, screens, cameras, etc. Obviously, that does have challenges for running an apprenticeship program where it's much easier to have somebody sat next to you to show them something on the screen than it is to try and teach them over a Teams call.
I think hybrid as well. I think to be able to train somebody, you need to have them in the office to be able to train them, and it's very difficult to do it over Teams or over video.
Matthew, you've got your hand up.
Yes, in construction, I think it's fairly obvious you can't dig a trench or build an airport working from home. But for me, I started my education. I was working building shopping centres and whatnot in Manchester. And what I learned in my 20s really was what I absorbed from other people within the office that I was working in. So I wasn't on the tools, I was working in a professional capacity, but I was absorbing a lot of information. I don't think that someone in their 20s would have that experience working from home. If someone's in their 40s and 50s and they know what they're doing, maybe they're doing an accounts role or something like that, and they're very confident and competent in their role, then they can do that from home. But graduates, apprentices, people in the young age, they need to learn from their own experience, and if they're fortunate, learn from other people's experience. And that's not really going to be very easy if they're not interacting with people all the time.
Thank you. And Peter, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, what Matthew said, basically.
Thank you, Chair.
Just a final question. You talked about UTCs. I'm a passionate supporter of university technical schools, and I went to one last week in East London, Mulberry UTC, and remarkable. And it isn't just STEM, they're also doing, they have an art studio for... do you think the government is doing enough to support UTCs? Should there be more of them? And does it work, the students starting at 14, because it's 14 to 19? And what could be done to kind of further the cause of university technical schools around the country, and working with businesses like these to make sure that the businesses interact with the schools and the students can do work experience?
Lots of questions there.
Yeah.
Yes, we are very supportive of UTCs, and lots of chambers have been involved in setting them up and in their leadership. They do work, and as a colleague said earlier, what's the point of getting someone to do academic route to GCSEs if they're not going to be excited and they're not going to do well in that? So the evidence we have from our UTCs in local areas is that once people are in that applied, contextualised setting, they really flourish, and they can make sure they have the maths and the literacy skills that everybody needs, but they can apply that learning. And employers really get behind this, because they can see that young people are developing the skills they need for the workplace, not only the sort of basic maths, digital literacy, but also that curiosity that was mentioned earlier, that I want to know how things work, why they work. And this, I believe, and our members say, helps young people when they reach the workplace afterwards, because if they come across something they've not seen before, they want to find a solution to it. They're problem solvers, they're natural problem solvers. They start to learn that critical thinking that we need in business. So should we see more UTCs? Yes, but I'd also like all schools to have the same approach. I'd like every young person to have the ability, the option of doing more applied and contextualised learning, so that they are more work ready.
There is talk of this idea that's come about of having UTC, not necessarily having a brand new UTC school, but a UTC stream of education in every school, so that students who wanted to do that would have a more of opportunity to do so. What do you think of that?
I think our members would very much welcome that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, everyone. I love these kind of sessions because we learn so much, and you guys are at the coalface and know exactly what needs to be done. And I think we've really appreciated the members having you from individual constituencies from around the country, and we've learnt a lot, and we'll definitely reflect much of what you said in our report when it comes out in a few months time.